So the science that Steiner was using was not the microscience that we see right now. So most of the scientists, they will try to go to the like the smallest things, to the base of everything. So which is why we call it microscience. So the science that he see was like more like a macro. So it was actually the interaction of different things that is also science. So and that's why he was like more like open-minded to all the spiritual things, because I feel from my perspective that he understood that science and spiritual things, they kind of go together. So there's a very strong connection between these two. And then if you get to see both of them interacting, so everything makes a lot more sense.
Yes.
And
then here we have the cow horns, and why burying manure. And you're saying you're taking deeper soil and putting it manure.
Well, we're taking the manure into the deeper soils, where you can get like a lot more microorganisms, and then so you're using these microorganisms in your benefit in the topsoil. So these microorganisms will start causing more fertility, and so that's why and I like to explain this sometimes as the science behind biodynamics. Of course, I love enjoying spiritual part. And if I ever become a farmer, this is what I'm gonna do. Even when the people probably will think that I'm crazy, or I'm doing like any kind of rituals, or like bearing horns.
Right.
It's just something natural. We're just using nature.
Yes.
We're using the spirit of nature as an ally in our farms. So and that's why this farming is amazing. And so that's what we try to recommend all the people to like try practicing biodynamic farming.
Yes, and so what you do is you take deeper soil with manure, cow manure, and what do? You mix it together.
We will take for example, we take when we're doing the manure, we take 2 grams of manure. When we're doing with quartz or silica, because we also have that, we will take 1 gram, and we will mix it on 13 liters of water. So then
13 liters.
We're gonna go clockwise, and we're gonna steer it for 1 hour. So basically every minute, so we're gonna have to change direction. So we're gonna make like a vortex or a funnel in the water to create the order, and then we go backwards to create the chaos.
So for a minute one way, a minute another way. For 60 minutes.
For 60 minutes. So and I like the fact that everything comes from chaos. So
true.
Scientists assure that the formation of the solar system that we know was the explosion of the former sun. So explosion equals to chaos. So scientists believe that, also biologists believe that any complex organisms like human bodies, like plants, animals, it was just chaos of cells that join together and they form something. So they create something. And when you go, if for example, from a religious perspective, when you go to the Bible, to chapter 1 of Genesis in the Old Testament, before God called anything to creation, you will find, and the Bible says that the darkness were over the surface of the water. So before God created anything, or God called anything to creation, darkness, chaos was over there. So that means that everything, from any perspective, everything comes from chaos, and that's the reason why we steer the water. And then we change directions in order to create that chaos.
To release the energetic of the preparation.
So, or in simple words, activating all these mystical and spiritual forces in our water.
Yes.
So,
so explain what happens. So you fill this cow horn with manure and soil, right?
Well, just manure.
Just manure.
But after 6 months underground, what you have is like an earthly preparation. Looks like dirt inside. Doesn't look like manure anymore.
Right.
So that's the job of the microorganisms, that they turn that organic matter, which is manure, into soils. So
and within the shape and the energetic of the cow horn, and in India the cow is a sacred animal. So it's a sacred form. Then, and you're burying that for 6 months under the ground, and then and the microorganisms and the forces can work together to create this wonderful sacred substance that then you stir in a vortex with water.
So, and there's something interesting also happening in the steering of the water, and this is the part where science gets into action. So, scientists found that in the water, microorganisms that we previously harvest in the horns will reproduce. So the reproduction of these microorganisms is done through mitosis, so which means that they will split apart and they will form a new microorganism. And it takes about 20-25 minutes to do it. Okay, so when you let it happen on its own. So when we start adding oxygen in our water, so the oxygen bubbles, every time we change direction, will force the splitting of the microorganisms. So besides activating mystical and spiritual forces in the water, we're helping to reproduce them, or we're forcing the reproduction of the microorganisms. So which means that when we apply that in our topsoils, there's gonna be more microorganisms recycling all the minerals and recycling all the organic matter of the soil, turning that available for the plants. When the people started to practice biodynamics in 1924, they found that the soils were recovering quickly. And one of the reasons why the people asked Rudolf Steiner about this is because they found the degradation caused by the chemicals on their land, caused on their animals, on the people's health. And that's why, well, they asked Steiner about this. So then Steiner, he came up with biodynamic farming, and the people were fascinated with it. And after that is when this started to spread around the world. So, but it got spread not because the scientist says, oh, this is something we have to do. It's because the people found that it works.
Right.
And that's a practical part of biodynamic work, biodynamic farming. You don't need to understand how fully works. All you need to understand is that it works. So then we have to do it. So and that's why this is something great that since I started working for this place has been fascinating for me. Learning every single day when I get to learn something new about biodynamic farming, so I get fascinated with it.
So explain the silica and what that, why you would make this prep, and what is this prep consist
So
of?
one of the things that Rudolf Steiner noticed in the soils is that they were lacking minerals. So they constantly minerals we lose the minerals in the soil. Well, when we expose the soils, when it rains hard, so the rain will wash part of these minerals. So that's actually a big problem. So he was trying to find a way to mineralize the soils back, or bring the minerals back to the soil. So, and that's why we're using quartz, or we're using like silica. So we're trying to use clear minerals. Steiner suggested that it works very good against the fungi, but also, you know, when we apply this and it falls in our soils, the microorganisms, the mycelium that we were talking about previously in the agroforestry, will be taking this calcium, and will be taking the mineral and will give it to the plant. But there's something else happening. We have here like powder. This is quartz powder, and what we have in here is just microcrystals. I don't know if you're gonna be able to get it on video, but when you see from the side, you can see that the rainbow colors reflected. So that means that in here, the microcrystals are reflecting the light. So over here, you can see all the different colors. So when you apply this over the plants, the microcrystals will increase the receptivity of light of the plants. So which means that they can actually process more photosynthesis. So more photosynthesis, so means that the plants will grow faster, will go stronger, and also that means that they will do more carbon sequestration.
We'll say that last word. Carbon
sequestration. So
yeah, what is that?
That means that the plants are gonna be taking the excess of carbon, which is causing the climate change right now, and will bring it back to the soil.
Okay.
So yeah, that's one of the things that the plants are doing for us. And so when we get to apply these naturals or biodynamic systems, so we can accelerate this, which means that we could actually fight the climate change just using plants. So,
yes.
And this is something that biodynamic farming will just reinforce by increasing the capacity of photosynthesis on the plants.
Wonderful. And then we see the cow skull.
Well, this one here is because, you know, in some of the preparations, because in 1924 when Steiner came up with biodynamic farming, he actually had like 8 different preparations. Here we have seen only 2. We have seen 500 and 501.
Yes.
But there were 8 different ones. Some of them we're using like cows' skulls or domestic animal skulls. We're using some other parts of their bodies, and we're also using different type of plants. For example, they were using stinging nettles. They were using yarrow flowers, bark of oak trees, chamomile. So all these kind of plants were also yarrow. Yeah. So all of them were just planted. Were buried with other animal body parts, and were also used as fertilizers. In our case, we're only doing these two. Well, number one, because we don't really produce like meat in the farm, so we don't kill the cows. So for us, it will be expensive to try to get some other elements to do the biodynamic farming. And the idea of this will be that you get to like recycle, the elements in your farm. So that's why we're not doing the other ones anyway. This is not gonna be that friendly to the people. If they come here and then they find like urine bladders just right here on the roofs, it's not gonna be a friendly or nice experience to your guests. So we're gonna stick to the other ones that are more like tourism friendly, because yes, we're doing ecotourism. So
yes,
but there's places where they just do farming that they will use all of them. So.
Yes, and at the retreat we make the biodynamic compost, and we put all the preps in that compost.
How do you? All right, excellent. So here we're only taking the first two that are like the ones that people will
well, this is more. Probably as much as people could digest, right? So this is enough.
So yeah, indeed, has been like over 10 months for me. Every single day reading and over again to like understand at least a little bit, because this is something really complex, and I know that this is something hard to understand. Steiner himself recommend not to read his book until you've been doing this for 30 years. I understood why when I tried to read the book. So it's hard to understand all the concepts that he talks about. So.
Right.
But I love it. So far, I love it.
Wonderful.